I quiet quit my marriage, and my husband acts like nothing changed. I quietly distanced myself from my marriage after enduring years of financial pressure and unmet promises from my husband. For the past year, I have deliberately created space between us, both physically and financially, and he has barely acknowledged it as long as we continue to appear married. The recent years of my 13-year marriage have been fraught with tension. After a decade of feeling more like a caretaker or roommate than a partner, I reached my breaking point. I made it clear that, without significant change, our future as a couple was bleak. He spent a week at a friend's house before returning home, and I hoped it would serve as the wake-up call he desperately needed. He never disclosed the issues to anyone outside our marriage. He promised to improve. He assured me he would stop depleting our finances. He claimed he would cease to drive us further into debt. He vowed to listen to my needs when I explicitly shared them. He promised to act on his commitments rather than continue with empty vows. Unfortunately, we endured another year of turmoil. While unemployed, he maxed out my credit card just 6 weeks after I had paid it off. His follow-through was absent, and he became defensive whenever I raised concerns. He would complete tasks that made him feel like a good husband while neglecting the responsibilities I expected of him as a partner. Despite earning sufficient income for a comfortable lifestyle, we found ourselves sinking deeper into debt every month. I agonized over various debt repayment and budgeting strategies, attempting to find one that would be manageable for him. I began to blame myself. I insisted on a 50-50 split of our expenses so he could understand that he was responsible for his share, rather than forcing me to cover everything when he ran out of funds, even though he consistently earned more than I did each month. I had a future to plan for, with family across the country and a terminally ill father I wished to visit, who has since passed away. We had 2 children to support, and I was attempting to maintain a reasonable credit score. When I expressed all of this to him, his responses were reassuring and what I needed to hear. He claimed to understand and promised to improve. He did not. Within a couple of weeks, he reverted to his old habits as if nothing had changed. I made the decision to rent my own apartment, and upon moving out, I felt an incredible sense of relief. My husband remained engaged and committed to working through our issues. After a month, I convinced myself we still had something worth fighting for, and like a fool, I returned home. Yet again, he never revealed our conflicts to anyone. He assured me we would have weekly check-ins, communicate better, and tighten his spending. However, things quickly fell back into their original disarray, deeper in debt with a declining credit score. Since then, we've had a series of honest, often heated discussions, primarily focused on finances. At one point, I accused him of valuing the appearance of a successful marriage over actually having one. He maintains that I am his best friend, that everything he does is for us and our future, and that he would be lost without me. Finally, in September, after yet another month in overdraft, I insisted that he open his own bank account for personal expenses so we could continue using the shared account solely for bills, rather than him overdrawing it every 2 weeks. I reminded him twice after that, but he claimed the lines were too long. Consequently, I endured the painful process of transferring everything into my separate bank account in December. Now, I cover all expenses with my own income and benefits, apart from his car payment and insurance. That was my final breaking point. I moved out of our bedroom and solidified our roles in my mind as co-parenting roommates. Since separating our finances, I have reduced my credit card debt by 50%, accumulated a modest savings, and purchased new items for myself like skincare products, hobby supplies, and clothing without the constant worry of shortfall for our mortgage. I finally feel liberated from the financial hostage situation I endured for far too long. This was still not the wake-up call I anticipated. Over the past 2 months, he continues to leave me in difficult situations, such as at the grocery store, out of funds and unable to contribute to feeding our children, despite his only current obligations being a car and insurance payment. We sleep in separate rooms each night. He has never suggested discussing the state of our relationship, and at this point, I lack the interest in engaging in the conversation. I have nothing new to express, and I refuse to repeat myself. I have surrendered and commenced the process of accumulating enough resources to leave and start anew when the kids graduate in 4 years, though I hope to do so even sooner. Despite this, he still expects me to join trips to visit his family as if nothing has changed, and I will, for the sake of our children. He remains fixated on maintaining the facade of a healthy marriage while we live as roommates, and seems entirely content as long as I reside within the same four walls as him. Is it 2029 yet? Edit. Thank you for the comments. First, I want to express my gratitude for the feedback. Instead of replying individually, I will attempt to address as many questions as possible here. This post served as a catharsis for me, a way to express what had been weighing on my heart, but I appreciate the opportunity to provide further details. I understand how absurd this may sound to those who have not experienced it, but it is far more complex than simply declaring your intentions to leave, packing your belongings, and walking out the door. The month I spent living separately gave me a harsh reality check about the feasibility of sustaining both a home and an apartment in the long term. I reside in Canada, where we are currently facing a housing crisis with a continuously rising cost of living. I consider myself fortunate just to own a home, and I have only recently begun constructing a path out of my current situation. I realize that if I wish to leave, I must be prepared. Yes, it may seem foolish that I am covering all expenses. However, I need to establish some financial stability first to gather the resources necessary for my departure. Should I evict him? Absolutely. Will he leave voluntarily? Unlikely, but I am open to finding out when that conversation occurs, though it has not happened yet. I have taken appropriate steps from a legal standpoint. To initiate a divorce due to marital breakdown, I must be separated for a year, and I have met the criteria for separation while living under the same roof. I intend to conduct more research and seek advice from someone knowledgeable about the process, but my immediate focus is on saving and filing for divorce at the end of this year. I appreciate those who pointed out my potential liability for his accruing more debt, as I had always assumed his poor credit would prevent him from being approved for anything. However, you never know. For those curious about my silence, I have not been silent. Although I tend to be reclusive, I have close friends who are aware of my situation. I have contemplated whether to continue attending his family gatherings, and I appreciate the input. The idea of pretending is truly unappealing, and I will gladly decline. Regarding our children, they are not privy to our financial struggles. I do everything within my power to keep that from them. However, the tension is often palpable, and they may be sensing it. I know I am not setting a good example, but I am doing the best I can with the resources available to me. I do not plan to prolong this situation for 4 years. If I can escape sooner, I will. I am in a position to set myself up properly, and not everyone has access to that opportunity. I live far from my family and have only myself to depend on. Thus, I refuse to undertake a half-hearted exit. I hope this provides some clarification. Thank you for the perspective I needed. Story 2. Valentine's Day chaos. Plans canceled, apologies flying, and her son's scared of me. I bike away, realizing I became the villain. This morning, we had planned to travel to Philadelphia for the Eagles parade and enjoy dinner. I already took time off for Valentine's Day, but since the Eagles won the Super Bowl, the parade has led to train disruptions after a specific time. None of us were aware that we needed a Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority key card or a day pass for the train. Additionally, neither of us drives, and there isn't a nearby train station where we could purchase a key card, so we had to cancel our plans. That was acceptable, but our dinner reservations had to be canceled as well since they were in Center City. Being vegan, our local options are limited, especially since we have eaten at most recently. I thought about ordering from Uber Eats or preparing a meal at home. She was quite keen on finding a restaurant, which I was fine with, but after she couldn't locate one that satisfied her or her son's preferences, I suggested once more that we could order from Uber Eats or cook. She indicated that she was not in the mood for either option. I volunteered to prepare a meal, yet she and her son are not fond of my cooking. This made me feel pressured to come up with a solution, but as I searched for restaurants, I found the same ones she had dismissed, leaving me at a loss. She expressed that she simply wanted to go out since it was Valentine's Day, but there were no suitable options. I asked her what we should do, considering none of the alternatives would work for us, and she stated she was unsure and quite upset about it. Eventually, She mentioned that I had upset her recently on our anniversary because I didn't engage with all the cute stories she had posted on her Snapchat. I primarily used the app to maintain a streak with her or to take photos, and I wasn't on my phone much that day due to our anniversary celebrations. I apologized, and she noted that I had an entire day after that to check her posts, but I worked the following day and couldn't check my phone unless it was during breaks, which I usually spent texting her. I apologized again and clarified my situation, but she reiterated that I had no issue using my phone while she was working out and tidying her room, which I acknowledged but honestly didn't remember at the time. I apologized yet again, but she kept emphasizing how much it hurt her. I felt unsure of how else to respond. While I continued expressing my apologies, I found myself met with further explanations of why she felt hurt. We have a challenging history regarding this issue. I often apologize for things that upset her and try to make it up, but she tends to bring it up in every relevant context. I understand she has emotions to process and that she is entitled to candidness. I communicate this to her, but when she repeatedly reminds me of the hurt I caused, it feels as though my efforts to make it right are never sufficient. I tell her this, but then she responds by saying that I am interpreting her words wrongly and that she doesn't mean it in that manner, which is valid. But it is how I feel, and I believe that should be acknowledged. After I had apologized excessively without making progress, I finally snapped and said something like, "I'm sorry that I am not doing enough to make it better or to make you happy," to which she replied that this was not her intent. She simply wanted me to understand how much it troubled her. I stated that I comprehended her feelings in the beginning, apologized, and assured her it would not happen again, yet she focused on my comment about not doing enough to make her happy. She claimed that I consistently misinterpret her words and that I had no right to feel or react in such a manner. I recognized that I should not raise my voice or argue and expressed my regret for reacting in that way. Then her son came downstairs, and she asked him what he wanted for dinner. He mentioned that he had heard us being loud. She subsequently apologized and claimed it was not a big deal, but that I was just getting upset over trivial matters, as if she wasn't raising her voice too, making me appear to be the aggressor. She has a pattern of telling him such things whenever we experience any disagreement, and I admit I have become notably more frustrated in my responses due to this persistent behavior over the past 3 years. Initially, I would merely apologize and remain silent, but when I tried to be quiet, she would claim I was angry and close to exploding. Her son is only 8 years old, and she began sharing these sentiments with him when he was 6, soon after I moved in with them. I endeavored to reassure both him and her that I wasn't angry and that I aimed to avoid causing issues for them, but over time, her repeated assertions would genuinely hurt me. Eventually, they began to anger me, as I strived to maintain a calm demeanor and not allow things to affect me. I constantly wondered how much more I could endure. I'm aware that I am far from the perfect partner, and I have certainly done and said things that could be improved. I strive to make both of them happy, especially her, and I put in a great deal of effort to make amends for anything that she claims causes her pain. However, these issues repeatedly resurface. I understand she is not obligated to move on, but it confuses me since she has also done things throughout our relationship that have hurt me. If I bring that up, she insists she didn't mean it that way, and I am simply interpreting it wrong and should just let it go because holding on to resentment is unhealthy. It feels, to me, as though I am not allowed to express any negative emotions about our relationship and should simply remain quiet and apologize for all that I seem to do wrong while she faces no repercussions. I do not seek sympathy, nor am I trying to diminish either of our actions for the sake of comparison. Eventually, her son ended up hiding behind a chair, stating he was scared of me while she accused me of making a scene and frightening him. I apologized to him, and she remarked that I instill fear in him, making him anxious, and that I am consistently mean. I offered another apology and communicated to him that I understood his feelings and did not intend for them to arise. She interrupted and asserted that I need to improve and change so as not to harm either of them. I replied, "Today, I can't address this. It has only gone downhill since we awoke. You really don't seem to grasp how I feel, despite me expressing it repeatedly. I acknowledge I reacted poorly to your behavior, and I am sorry, but I refuse to remain here while you depict me as the villain over something that is unrelated to today's discussions. If you wish to view me as the antagonist today, then I will do you both a favor and leave, allowing you to enjoy a pleasant Valentine's Day together, because I do not want to spend it feeling like an issue. Thus, I packed a bag with my laptop and charger and rode my bike to the mall to get some distance. Upon my arrival, I noticed her reposting content on TikTok about deserving better treatment, which upset me further. I texted her, questioning why we should stay together if my treatment of her is so egregious. I expressed that I am in favor of her being honest with me. However, if things are left unresolved after I apologize and attempt to heal the wound as best as I can, I question the purpose of our relationship. I wanted to know why it is acceptable for her to tell me I have hurt her, yet when I express my feelings on any occasion, including this one, I am blamed for misinterpreting her feelings or being overly reactive. I feel lost, especially since I had hoped to spend Valentine's Day together. I apologize for the lengthy message. I welcome any criticism about my actions and genuinely seek feedback. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Edit summary. I became weary of being told that everything is my fault on Valentine's Day and decided to leave my partner and her son to avoid ruining their day. Story 3. I am 25, have fallen in love with my best friend F31, but had to end this relationship. Was that decision good? Hello, here is my story. Do you believe I made the right choice in ending a remarkable friendship so that one of my two best friends could find happiness while I am heartbroken? For your information, I translated this with the help of ChatGPT from my native language to ensure accuracy. Did I make the right choice to end this friendship? In the past year, I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and depression. This diagnosis occurred in May, right in the midst of everything that transpired. The beginning, as noted in the title, I am a 25-year-old man, and she is a 31-year-old woman. The age gap was never an issue for us. We hardly noticed it. I would sometimes joke about it, mentioning that she was closer to the grave, but it was always in jest. We met online, and given that we lived over 300 kilometers apart, we typically saw each other only once or twice a year. Nevertheless, for 4 years, we communicated daily on Discord and Messenger. Signs of a change last year, I observed that she was more accessible than usual. We spent New Year's Eve together, talking and gaming. My plans had fallen through, and her boyfriend was unwell. At that moment, it felt entirely normal. However, around Valentine's Day, I realized she was consistently around. At one point, she proposed that we take a vacation together. This caught me off guard. It felt like a significant move. She also invited me on other trips that I could not attend. Her attitude had shifted. For instance, she joked that we would live together in hell after we died. She was interested in horror, so the hell reference didn't surprise me, but the notion of living together eternally did. There were several other small instances, and even a friend who overheard us once inquired why we weren't dating. During this period, I learned that she had separated from her boyfriend. I was uncertain about what she wanted from me. A confusing trip. In June, we attended an erotica-themed convention mostly in jest, something we had planned earlier. As usual, we had separate rooms but spent 99% of the time together. One evening, I ordered a nicer Uber, and the driver arrived in a new Tesla. She was excited and remarked, "If we were together, you would have an incredibly happy night tonight." I was utterly taken aback and didn't know how to respond. A few weeks later, after more comments like that, I confessed that I had feelings for her and inquired if she perceived our relationship differently. She stated that she regarded me only as a friend. It pained me, but I requested that she refrain from making those types of jokes for a while so that I could process my emotions. I also communicated that if she ever made those jokes again, I would assume she was serious. The final straw, a month and a half later, we traveled to Greece. We spent a great deal of time together, and again, she made comments that felt like they crossed the lines of friendship. She also anticipated frequent compliments, which appeared more suited to a romantic relationship than a friendship. At that point, I ceased to suppress my feelings. Regrettably, a month after we returned, I discovered she had met with her ex, and they were working on rekindling their relationship. I was heartbroken. I felt manipulated, as if I had been her temporary emotional support. I was also hurt that she disregarded my one request, something immensely significant to me, when I had never overstepped her boundaries. That's when I chose to end the friendship. How it concluded in retrospect, my error was likely ending things through a message. However, until that point, all of our serious discussions, including disagreements and conflicts, had always been managed via text. I sought to be kind and express my feelings with honesty. In return, she told me she hated me. I let my emotions get the better of me as well, and we had a brief argument, but I never said anything cruel because I still cared for her. I just didn't know how to communicate that anymore. The most challenging aspect was that I did not want to put her in a position where she had to choose between her relationship and our friendship. Yet at the same time, I understood that I could not simply be her friend while still harboring love for her. It was implausible for me. That is why I made the arduous choice to walk away. An attempt at closure, this all unfolded in early November. At the time, I convinced myself that she genuinely despised me. It was painful, but I endeavored to come to terms with the loss of my best friend despite still being profoundly in love with her. At the year's end, she reached out under the guise of wanting closure. Initially, she assigned blame to me for everything. We began talking again, exchanging viewpoints. When she highlighted instances where I had acted inappropriately and I acknowledged them, I apologized. I did this several times, although it was not easy. Yet, she never once apologized to me. For instance, I indicated that I disliked it when she mentioned a mutual acquaintance whom I abhorred and had asked her to stop referencing him. Her response was that she spent time with him and wanted to tell me about it. Conversely, if she ever requested that I refrain from sending memes with a certain theme, I respected that and never sent them again. At that moment, I revealed to her that I had been in love with her for an extended period. She stated she wanted to remain friends, but only if I had no feelings for her anymore, even though she was already in a relationship. The final farewell. Ultimately, we did not restore our friendship. I communicated that my feelings were not simple, they were genuine and profound. We exchanged farewells. I wrote an emotional message, but her response was cold and distant, something akin to "it was nice knowing you." That stung. Even though it has been a month and a half, I still cannot stop thinking about her. Everything reminds me of her, and I feel tears welling up when I reflect on what we shared and what will never unfold again. We had so many plans for future trips together. It devastates me. Despite seeing a psychologist and taking medication prescribed by a psychiatrist, I do not feel significantly better. I have been seeking solace in prayer and my faith, but I am still unsure of what steps to take next. I feel immensely lost and heartbroken. I do not blame her, although I harbor some resentment. Yet above all, I still love her deeply. Where I stand now recently, I reached out one final time for my own closure since we had concluded things ambiguously. I do not know what she responded because I cannot bring myself to read it. I have also completely cut myself off from all social media and no longer utilize them at all. I have attempted to distract myself playing games, watching series, collecting vinyl records, reading books, going for walks, programming, but nothing seems to ease the pain. I am uncertain what else I can do. In summary, last year, I, aged 26, was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and depression. I developed feelings for a close female friend, age 31, who sent mixed signals, but when I confessed my feelings, she stated we were merely friends. Later, she reconciled with her ex and I felt used. I ended the friendship via text, which led to an argument. Months later, she contacted me for closure but never apologized for anything. I admitted that I had loved her, but she insisted we could only be friends if I had no remaining feelings. That was impossible for me, so we went our separate ways. I did not want to make her choose between her boyfriend and our friendship, but I also could not remain just friends while still being in love with her. Now, I am still heartbroken. Therapy, medication, and distractions have not alleviated my pain. I contacted her for my own closure, but have yet to read her response. I have completely withdrawn from social media, but I am unsure how to move forward. Story 4. Aita for wanting to be paid. I, a 20-year-old, am currently employed at my family's business where I handle the paperwork and accounting. I began working there on June 24. Initially, I earned $900 per week, which I found quite favorable and appreciated. At that time, I was not requesting much, but I was grateful for what I received. For context, I possess no prior experience in accounting. I didn't express a desire to work for the family business, as I was hesitant about mixing family and work. However, my father insisted on my joining. Fast forward a month or two, and I began to make errors in my work and cash management. Consequently, my parents reduced my salary to $600 per week. I accepted this change because I recognized my mistakes, and it motivated me to improve, which I did. I work 6 days a week. I have the advantage of working from home, and I complete full shifts from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I did not voice any concerns for the following 4 months, but I started to grapple with the notion that I wasn't compensated adequately. During this period, part of me felt guilty for thinking I deserved more, believing I should be thankful for what I had. However, another part argued that being paid $100 per day for 8-hour workdays was not fair. I suppressed my feelings of greed and continued to accept my current wage. Please note, I have been trained in using accounting software, but that is the extent of my training. I had to be corrected to learn about essential aspects of my job that I initially found challenging. Eventually, my aunt, who taught me the fundamentals of accounting, called to ask how I was finding my job. I replied that it was okay, and as the conversation progressed, I shared my experiences. I expressed that I was managing customer relations alongside supplier invoices. She acknowledged my feelings and informed me that I was not being compensated fairly. For context, she is my father's older sister. I vented to her about having to simultaneously care for my baby brother while also handling my work responsibilities, including dropping him off at school and putting him to bed. My aunt said she would discuss this matter with my father and subsequently ended the call. I could have brought up the issue with my parents directly regarding my pay, but anticipated being reprimanded and labeled ungrateful. Thus, hearing my aunt validate my concerns provided me some comfort. After a few hours, my father returned home and he appeared very angry. My mother entered the room and admonished me for involving my aunt. She proceeded to explain that my aunt would not support me the way they do and effectively called me selfish for wanting a higher pay. For additional context, at my previous job, I earned between $600 and $800 per week for 4 days of work. I left that position due to the toxic work environment, which severely impacted my mental health. My parents made me feel ungrateful and greedy for desiring an adjustment in my salary, comparing my previous employment to my current role and claiming that I was doing less now, which is not true. If anything, I felt I was taking on more responsibilities in a family business. My older sister, who lives independently in an apartment purchased by my parents, criticized me as well, stating that they are not wealthy and accused me of selfishness. My father chastised me and asked me to leave the house, so I went to stay at my grandparents' home. I realized that I shouldn't have involved my aunt, but I thought she could provide an unbiased opinion since she works in the same field. My parents never checked in on my work experience or the challenges I faced. They only admonished me for my mistakes. In contrast, my aunt regularly checked in on me and offered support, going out of her way to assist me despite living 40 minutes away. While staying at my grandparents' house, I did not perform any work for 3 days, but eventually I completed it because no one else could and I felt guilty. Soon after, my aunt informed me that my parents wanted me to return home. Honestly, I believe they wanted me back primarily to help care for my baby brother. Upon returning home, my parents informed me that I would no longer receive payment for my work, suggesting that if I needed money for outings, I should simply ask. Although I felt upset initially, I came to terms with the situation, understanding that I had brought it upon myself. Fast forward 6 months later, I have been without a steady income while continuing to work 6 days a week. When I go out, max twice a week, I ask my parents for money. They provide me with $100 each time, and on good days, $200. I strive to make that money last as long as possible to minimize my requests for additional funds. Although I continue working diligently, my motivation has diminished due to the lack of rewards. I dislike being financially dependent on my parents and the necessity of asking them for money each time I go out. A few weeks ago, I requested my mother to reinstate my salary for my full-time job. She agreed. After a week, I inquired again, and she affirmed it. I followed up again a week later, and she directed me to speak with my father. As of this week, I asked her once more about my salary, and requested that she talk to my father, explaining my desire to save for an upcoming trip with my boyfriend as well as future events, Christmas, birthdays, etc., to avoid asking for money. My sister suggested that I refrain from requesting money for a few weeks, but then ask my father for a large sum just before my trip. My mother concurred, considering it a good idea. I told them I would ask for around 3,000, and my sister reinforced the notion of postponing my requests until closer to my departure. Eventually, my sister was no longer on the phone with my mother, and it was just the two of us. 3,000 for your trip is quite significant, she remarked. I responded that either I receive my pay and save for the trip without judgment, or I could request a larger amount right before it. She made a comment, which I can't recall, and I felt hurt but remained silent. Eventually, I opened up and shared that I was offended by her belief that I was asking for too much. Please keep in mind that I try to limit my requests, fully aware of the hard work my parents put into earning their income. In retaliation, she accused me and my sisters of exploiting their finances without giving anything in return. She also claimed that I spend irresponsibly. However, I usually allocate my funds appropriately for food, necessities, gym expenses, and groceries. I replied that I essentially have no income, asking what she expected me to do. She retorted that we never offer to contribute to dinner when we go out, to which I responded that how could I offer when I have no money? She fell silent. As the discussion escalated, I became increasingly frustrated and upset because the underlying message conveyed was that I was requesting too much money when I knew I wasn't. My monthly expenditures are lower than both of my sisters. Despite her complaints about covering my nails and toes, I reminded her that, when I was earning a regular income, I could pay for those expenses myself. After the argument, I got up and left. I now find myself conflicted about whether I am in the wrong for wanting to be compensated fairly.